Hello Kindred Longevity Lifestyle Designers, this is Gavin here with secretsoflongevity.com. You've heard me talk about milk, you've heard me talk about its benefits for some people, and more specifically the benefits of raw milk, grass-fed milk, and having all those qualities in milk to make it something that's much different from the mainstream dairy that is the cause for a lot of people in the health community to actually be, at least when they first get into it, backlashing against dairy as a blanket statement. And then once you start to learn these intricacies about dairy and these different things that make it more harmful or more beneficial, then you actually start to see it as a very great, potentially beneficial food for the vast majority of people, at least in developed countries. So I've gone over this in depth in this video here. I'm just going to link to it. It's the longest video on my channel still. I haven't come close to beating that at an hour and a quarter in terms of the total time, but if you're profoundly against any idea of milk, I would direct you there. You have to watch that. I completely break down it to the nth degree, even going into some of the major criticisms of raw dairy, or dairy in general rather, such as the China study and things like that. Now, what we're going to be just briefly going over here in this video is how important is the raw aspect of dairy. By all means, this is not a video to knock raw dairy. I consume it when it's available to me. However, having given this some thought and more recently just really looked at what's in my life and what do I have available to me right now, because I'm in an area of the world with some of the most strict laws around pasteurization of dairy, unfortunately. I do not have the absolute freedom to be able to indulge in raw dairy as easily as some places like California or other states where in the US where it's completely legal, or just not as illegal as it is here to get it straight from the farmer. So that has me thinking about, on the scale of if we're trying to get the best food possible, and in this case we're talking about dairy, what are all the different factors going that we want to have at the maximum capacity? So probably the number one thing is the fact that we want this dairy, no matter what form it's coming in, to be grass-fed. That's a very high standard that we need to hold to what we're consuming. We also need to have it be unhomogenized. That is, by and large, perhaps the single most causative factor for disease in people's consumption of dairy. So if you're consuming homogenized dairy, whether it's homogenized cream, homogenized milk from skim all the way to 3.8% or 3.5% whole milk, that homogenization, which is when they break the fat globules down and make the whole thing not be able to separate when it's sitting on the shelf in the store, is very detrimental to a body. Homogenization causes the enzyme xanthine oxidase to be encapsulated in a liposome, which is like fat, and that allows that enzyme, which is actually a harmful enzyme, not a good enzyme, to be absorbed in our body and utilized, whereas it would normally be broken down in digestion in some fashion. And that then gets into our arteries, causes inflammation, and basically is the major cause for problems associated with dairy when it comes to heart disease. So when that's gone, you see a big clear up of a lot of negative symptoms, long-term chronic health issues that come from dairy. So, grass-fed, non-homogenized. Another major one we want to have going on is the fact that we should be getting our dairy from non-hybridized cows, or least hybridized possible. So that's the more traditional breeds of cattle, not the Holstein varieties, which is the stereotypical black and white patchy cow that you see in commercials and used in media, because that makes up over 90% of the source of dairy in at least the Western culture. And that is very problematic in that the majority of the casein contained in dairy that comes from those cows, from Holsteins, is predominantly A1 casein, which is very aggravating to the body. You heard me talk about this in this video, which I'm just leaving up here. It's the A2 casein, which is naturally found in human breast milk, in goat's milk, and predominantly in greater abundance than the A1 casein. The A2 is found in these non-hybridized breeds of cattle, such as the Guernsey cow, Jersey cow, and these other smaller cows that don't produce such ginormous amounts of milk, which is why the farmers go for the Holsteins. And it essentially is going to create a milk that doesn't have as much of this A1 casein, and therefore is not associated with all the risk factors that A1 creates, such as allergies, indigestion, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, virtually every chronic disease out there. And the A2 is much more digestible. It is a very somewhat tougher to digest protein than compared to the whey aspect of dairy, but it can give you more sustained energy for that reason. So casein as a whole can't make a blanket statement that it's unhealthy. It's the difference between A1 and A2. So we could go on and on about different factors. Organic is also a very important standard. You could have raw milk that does not fit any of these things. It could have hormones added to it. The cows could be eating grains mostly. The cows could be on antibiotics. The cows could be all Holsteins. And while I haven't gone to that extreme of consuming raw dairy that's that bad of quality, I've gone through, over the last few years since getting more into raw dairy, not seeing the greatest of standards being held in the raw sort of sub-industry. It is under the radar in Ontario. I have gone the legit route and have been part of cow shares and things like that. And it still wasn't at the same standard that I was really looking for. And if I come across a standard that is high enough, I'm going to go for it. But because of what I'm looking at here, I've actually made the choice to consume some pasteurized dairy. And it's not the ultra high temperature pasteurization, the UHT pasteurization, which is unspeakable levels of heat that is just unnecessary. It makes for extremely long shelf lives of the milk. But it's just the regular heating, which doesn't cause a ridiculous amount of damage. It does eliminate the enzymes, but as someone who doesn't have any degree of lactose intolerance, it's something that I do great on. I don't even get very mucousy on dairy. Ideally, you'd want to be doing more of the fermented types of dairy, so cheese, kefir, yogurt, etc. But even just drinking some whole milk or even cream, if it's pasteurized and you don't have a problem with it, and it meets a lot of these standards that I was talking about of grass-fed, organic, ideally from non-hybridized cows, and definitely absolutely non-homogenized, then it's a pretty legit food source. It could be a step even better and be raw, but we're talking about a very small fraction in terms of the effects on your health. And for me, because of what I have at my disposal, having it in my diet is actually even better for me than not having it and waiting for the absolute perfect standard to come along. So there's actually organic, pastured milk being sold in my local health food store that I've now realized is better than anything I can get from these farmers that are filled with drama, kind of lying through their teeth when they say my milk's so great. Even though it's raw, they were feeding, I found out after time, more grains than I originally thought, or they had Holstein cows in their herd, etc. So go with what's best at your option. If you're the type of person that just does not do well on dairy, of course, don't consume it, or just consume things like butter and cheese, which in the process of making them, even if they're raw or not, are still probably going to be very easily digestible for you, because that lactose is no longer there. If your issue is any type of casein, and there's people that have that type of allergy or intolerance, then go for the thing that's more fat dominant, like the butter. And then there's going to be the unique people that just simply cannot touch dairy in any way, shape, or form. But you really have to look at where you fit on this whole scale, and whether there's certain types of dairy that work better for you than others. And you do the best you can for what you have at your disposal. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. This seems pretty reasonable to me. Maybe you're extremely passionate about raw milk and that's an absolute must for you. But really, I do feel very strongly that those other things I listed, the homogenization being number one, are more important standards than the raw standard. So With that, take care and embrace life without limits.